Good afternoon and welcome to the College of Continuing and Professional Studies webinar, Master Meetings with Decision Makers. Thanks so much for joining us. Next slide, please. My name is Shanta Bulai, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. If you have future questions about this webinar or other programs we offer, the college's contact information will be on the last slide of this presentation. I'm delighted to introduce the topic for today's webinar, Master Meetings with Decision Makers. Are you uncomfortable running meetings with senior leaders? Have you received feedback that you lack confidence in when you're presenting? As you move up in your career, it's common to feel like you're not quite hitting the mark when leading meetings with senior leaders. In this webinar, we'll discuss how to demonstrate your leadership skills in meetings with your senior leaders. You'll learn how to use meetings to get the clarity and support you need to do your job effectively and move the work forward. You'll get more comfortable being assertive when leading meetings, balancing decision making and collaboration in your meetings, and lastly, sharing your point of view with senior leaders even when you don't know the right answer. It's a pleasure to introduce the presenter for today's webinar, Lindsay Read. Lindsay brings a well-informed, creative approach to work with high-performing and high-potential leaders with 20 years of experience coaching and consulting at world-class universities and organizations around the globe. Lindsay, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your wisdom on this topic. I will pass it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Shanta. And just wanted to say thank you to the CCAPS team for their teamwork and help getting this webinar off the ground. It's been great getting to know you and working with you so far. And thank you everybody for being here today. As Shanta mentioned, I am a leadership development coach and educator, and I work with people to help them envision the lives that they want and really think about who they want to be and then how to get there. And this often involves making some changes to their current way of doing things. And we'll get to how that impacts meetings in a minute. But ultimately, it feels like it's about helping people do two things: adapting to their environments and also influencing their environments to change those environments in important and valuable ways. And so today we're going to kind of think about meetings as a mini environment or a culture. So I want to get back to the goals for today. I'm really interested in helping you gain comfort. And comfort, it's not going to be an immediate transformation in how you feel about the meetings that you have with senior leaders. But gaining comfort is a really important part of starting to make changes in your life and starting to move from just thinking and wishing that things would be different, perhaps, and actually making them so. So it's really, I do want to focus on your comfort level. And then I wanted to point out my use of the word skills here. So my hope is that you leave here today more comfortable with these three skills. And I'm using skills as kind of a broad term. These are kind of like competency areas, as you probably know, and they contain a lot of micro skills within them. And that's kind of what leadership development helps people do, is to kind of focus correctly on kind of like the right scope of areas that they want to change in their lives. So I want to just start by asking you to have a piece of paper and a pen or pencil ready to take some notes as we go. Of course, you can use your computer if that's easier for you, but just having a way to take some notes as we go. And the first thing I want to ask you to do is to look at these three bullet points here. And I want you to note your current level of comfort with each of those. And we'll do it on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is you're very uncomfortable in this space. So very uncomfortable being assertive when you're leading meetings. And 10 is that you're extremely comfortable in this area and you've got it. You're an expert. You don't need any more help. So please take a moment to just jot down a number for each of these bullet points. Okay, super. All right, now the second thing I want you guys to do is to put a star or a circle next to or around the skill area that is most interesting to you right now. All right. So now we're going to get moving. I want to tell you what is bringing me here today to talk about this specific topic. And that is that these days I actually really love meetings. And it's been a journey for me. I've always loved working with people. I've always enjoyed getting to know new people and kind of um, experiencing different personality styles. Like that's always been, since I was a little kid, something very interesting to me. But then when I started working as a professional, meetings it really depended. There was a lot of variation in my experience in meetings. And and so one reason I'm here today is because I have really experienced a change, and it had a lot to do with the effort and energy that I put into the meetings that I was in, and some of the personal development work that I've done around learning about myself, accepting others, and really understanding what the different purposes and priorities of meetings are. Of course, we only have an hour together today, but I will be teaching a short course on effective meetings in mid-May through CCAPS. And so if this is an interesting topic to you and you want to go deeper, would love to see you at that course. But just a little bit more about that. I have a lot of personal experience in meetings myself, but these days I work in leadership development and I work with individuals on their own leadership development journeys. And so I have now heard hundreds of stories from people as they grow in their careers and in their lives. And some of that I can now bring to you in this presentation. Also, a lot of my work has been in research and um, leadership development in academic settings. So I kind of bring that research and theory in addition to my own experience and the stories of others. And so it's a real joy to be here today. I want to ask you also what it is that brought you here today. Um, I want you, because we don't have time to discuss that in person, take a note to yourself. What is it that is bringing you here? And maybe a more specific way you could think about this is look ahead. What is an upcoming meeting that you have where you anticipate feeling some discomfort? You're not maybe looking forward to it. And again, put a number on that. How are you feeling about that from 1 to 10? Is it going to be easy? Is it going to be extremely hard? And I want you to have that meeting in mind as we continue throughout this presentation. All right. So, meetings, as you know already, are really essential parts of our work lives. They are, and our personal lives, to be clear. They are a part of what helps us feel satisfied at work and produce high quality work. They're essential parts of the workday and the workspace. They are also where we see each other and where we get to know each other. And because of the extreme variation in what meetings feel like, we can have very different feelings about from one meeting to the next, and they themselves can have different cultures. Um, I believe that in general, meetings are undervalued and underutilized, and that most of us don't feel we have the time to adequately prepare for them. Nor do we necessarily like how many of the meetings are run that we're a part of. And so this is partly about how to, again, gain some comfort in influencing meetings in the ways that you want to, particularly those with senior leaders. Grace, and I'm going to ask you to pull up a poll. I'd like everybody to complete this poll and answer the question of how many meetings do you have with senior leaders in the next 2 days. So I'll just give folks a minute to answer that. I know it might take you a minute to think about that. All right, Grayson, are you able to show us the results? All right, so let's take a look at those results. All right, good. We have a clear winner. So, five in the 5 range, maybe the 1 to 5 range, not more than 10, which is reassuring. Good. I'm sure if I asked the question in a different way, if it was more general, how many meetings do you have in the next couple of days? We might have some people that have 10 plus. But good. So as we go through this, keep in mind at least one meeting that is causing you a little bit of friction. And there's going to be some chances to kind of dig into that a little bit more. All right, good. So how we're going to go about getting to the goal of today's webinar. I'm going to do that a little bit through storytelling, a little bit through the sharing of a tool that can be useful to simplify the complexity that surrounds meetings. The idea of how do we deal with multiple personalities, the hierarchies that might exist in organizations, and the need to achieve something in these meetings and more broadly with whatever projects that you're working on. Also, we're going to use questioning as a tool that you can use on your own to help you resolve your own discomfort around meetings and to help you gain clarity around where to put your energy. And then finally, applying this to your life. So doing a little bit of a deeper dive into the application. All right. So I want to start with a story that is a specific story about a specific person, but also has a lot of elements that I think are really common to many of us. This is someone that I've worked with in coaching. She was aware that she needed to be more assertive when leading meetings. When she came into our coaching engagement, she was already aware of that. She valued collaboration much more than decision making in meetings. And she didn't see that her own point of view was desired among a room of senior leaders. So her story kind of fits in to the goals of this webinar, I think, in a really nice way. I'm going to tell you about her. I'm going to call her Maria. She's a real person. That's not her name, but so let's hear about Maria's story. She had been identified as a rising leader in her company. Her company was investing in her continuing education and her leadership skills. So she was already very talented, and she enjoys working with people. She's ambitious. She finds it fairly easy to manage projects and people. She wants to be more assertive in her meetings with senior leaders based on some feedback that she's gotten, which I'll talk about in a moment. So we worked together over several months. First, we worked together to create a development goal for her to get more comfortable presenting in meetings with senior leaders. And that's what we worked on together over those several months. Maria, as I mentioned, loves to be part of a team. So the desire to be part of the team wasn't part of the problem here. She spends a lot of time and energy thinking about how to give her team work that they enjoy. But her attention is primarily placed on the satisfaction of her direct reports. And her attention was a little bit less on how to show up with senior leaders. So here's how she tended to run her meetings when she met with senior leadership. She brought her spirit of collaboration into those meetings. She came in with the belief that everybody in the meeting had something to offer, and she wanted to hear from each of them. So whenever she had a problem that she or her team couldn't resolve, or when she wanted input or direction on a work issue, she brought together a group of about 6 senior leaders. And in the meetings with them, she would share her work problem and wait for them then to give her direction on what she and her team should do. She'd take these different perspectives, and if there wasn't consensus, she would go back to her desk and write an email to the decision maker and kind of share these perspectives and then wait for the decision maker then to tell her what to do. And she started to get feedback from these senior leaders that she was maybe using their time not as wisely as she could have, and that she really should be more assertive and decisive if she's going to be considered for a promotion. So she took this feedback, but she didn't really know what to do with it. She did have some information that so she did have a recording of herself in meetings. She had taken it upon herself to record herself, so she knew how she showed up in these meetings, and these would have been virtual meetings. And she noticed that she didn't look that confident. And she also noticed that she was kind of taking on a conciliatory tone with her senior leaders. So she knew she wanted to kind of change those things, but she didn't really know how. And so she asked for my help being more assertive in meetings. And she realized she was so comfortable with the collaborative approach that that had become a habit that she brought with her everywhere. But in fact, what she was leaving out was her own perspective. So she was not sharing her own perspective on her work and the work problem when she came into those meetings with senior leaders. And so her perspective was completely missing from the conversation. And that we discovered was actually what they meant by being more assertive. It wasn't necessarily that they were asking her to be the decision maker, but more that they were missing her point of view. And they were using different words. You know, being assertive, it's not always clear what's meant by that. So we had to do a little bit of problem solving. So she's come to discover a different way of being in meetings, and that it's not about changing who she is. It's not about dropping some of her skills. It's not about leaving collaboration aside. It's actually about adding on. It's adding on the ability to think through her perspective and share that with her senior leaders when it makes a difference. And so she kind of changed. She actually overhauled the way that she did these meetings and started to meet with individuals one-on-one to kind of share and problem solve and ask other people to be a sounding board as she developed her perspective, because she didn't always have one to offer. It actually sometimes takes work to develop that perspective, and doing that in a safe space with a smaller group can be helpful. So I wanted to share that story with you, and then we're going to go into each of these skill areas that we're going to develop. So the first one being more assertive when leading meetings. Now, I'm going to offer a tool for that you can use to help you be more assertive. It's not going to, it may not be useful to everybody in this room. It may be something you're familiar with, but I want to kind of share how you can use a tool to help you become more clear on how you might assert yourself in these meetings. All right, so this is simply called the communication triangle. And here's what it looks like. It's super basic. And imagine that there's three main parts to consider when you're planning how to be more assertive with decision makers. There's you, there's the meeting topic or purpose, and there's the decision makers themselves. And each line of this triangle illustrates the relationship you have with each of those things. So if we take a look at you and the decision makers, what is your relationship with each of them? Think about how much trust you have in them, how much trust they have in you, how much comfort you have being in the space with them, how much comfort you have sharing your opinions and your thoughts and ideas with them versus being more passive. And notice that there's along that line, you can think about where do I need to maybe dial things up a little bit? Is there more attention I might need to put on my relationships with these people? And you can think about them as a group or as individuals, because certainly they each bring something different to the table. Similarly, if you look at the relationship or the line between you and the meeting topic, right? What is your comfort level speaking to that topic? Might it be asking for more of your attention? Or are you pretty comfortable and you feel like you have expertise and it doesn't actually require any preparation or extra work for you to share your point of view? And finally, at the bottom, there is a relationship between the decision makers and the meeting topic. It's different than your relationship with the meeting topic. They have a different perspective on it and a different level of familiarity. Sometimes a deeper understanding, sometimes not. Sometimes they've been distant from that work for a while as they've moved up in the organization. And so they're maybe relying on you to be more of a source of information. So let me just share. These are some of the questions that you can consider as you look at this and use this tool. And it's really meant to help you simplify and clarify, okay, how can I assert my point of view? All right, I might need to work through some of these questions. And it can be helpful to think about whether your concerns are more about the topic or the people in the room. And if it's both, pick one that feels more important to start with. And then ask yourself, what can you do? What is one thing you could do to get more comfortable with the decision makers and or the topic? And honestly, with yourself in being in these meetings, right? All right. And if you're stuck, it can be helpful just simply brainstorm, right? Brainstorm some ideas, start to get yourself thinking, and then you can use that set of ideas to prioritize and pick one to move forward with. Often the brainstorming is part of what helps us get unstuck when we're not sure how to move forward. All right. So I want you to come back to the meeting that you identified at the beginning of this presentation, the one that's coming up that you anticipate leading in, and that whenever you think about it, it causes some tension for you. And maybe make a note to try out using this communication triangle and helping you figure out, okay, what's the next step for me here? How can I prepare for this particular meeting? All right, let's go on to the second skill area, balancing decision-making and collaboration in meetings. So the story I told earlier about Maria, her balance was much more on collaboration initially. And over time, as she worked on it, she started to use started to put more emphasis on decision making and a little bit less on collaboration in the meetings themselves. She started to use the meetings more for the purpose of decision making, which changed the way that people interacted in the meetings. And of course, this is very dynamic, and it can depend a lot on what the purpose of the meeting is, right? Okay, so the tool that I want to introduce for this is just a simple tool of questioning, just asking yourself some questions to help you find a balance between decision making and collaboration in meetings. And I don't mean that they need to be perfectly balanced, right? It's just more the idea of thinking through what that balance might need to be given the purpose of the meeting. So the first question, right? What is the purpose of the meeting? Is it obvious? Does everyone already know who's participating in it? Or does this maybe take a little bit of effort to discern the purpose? Just because a meeting has an agenda doesn't necessarily mean that the purpose is explicit and known by everyone. And if this is a meeting that you are leading or a strong contributor in, it may be helpful to make this more explicit, both to yourself and to others. And once you have an idea of what the purpose is, how does that inform the way you design the meeting itself? And also use opportunities before and after the meeting to achieve your aims. As I mentioned before, Maria kind of changed her approach from like a default that would invite 6 senior leaders to the meeting, and she switched it up to use one-on-one meetings more often in the preparatory phase before she would bring those individuals back together. And in those meetings, she would use a lot less time. Maybe it would go from an hour meeting to a half-hour meeting where a decision was made at the end. Okay. And then, this question, which of course gets asked all the time, right? But really digging into the answer to this. What does this success look like? Which is a very common question to ask, but what does it feel like? And here I'm talking about thinking about what success looks like for you in this meeting, and how do you want it to feel when you're in the meeting? And how do you want it to feel for others in meetings? Um, I tend to really prioritize humor and fun and energetic meetings. So I look for opportunities to bring those in and to kind of set the tone at the beginning. But also being really clear that there's a reason that we're all together and that it's worth our time. It does take energy to do this and to value it appropriately. Third, what do members in the group value in the meeting? This comes up a lot in coaching where maybe I'm having a conversation with someone and they realize I don't even actually know what people in the group value in a meeting. I'm not actually as clear as I thought I was. And once we start to look into different roles, different personality types, different aims for that meeting, we realize, oh yeah, people come with different values, and it's not impossible to discern those. You can spend even a little bit of time to get clearer, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but a little bit of extra work here really helps to figure out what's that balance between how I should incorporate decision making and collaboration in the meeting. And this is a big one. What is your role in the meeting? It's not necessarily your role or title in the organization, right? And this is another one that comes up so often in coaching conversations where we realize, oh yeah, it's not actually clear why I'm even in this meeting. And so while this is a common question to ask, it's really the effort that you put into answering it that can be helpful. And I would recommend spending a little bit of time yourself trying to get clear and answering that question for yourself. And if you can't get to an answer you're satisfied with, reach out to someone else who can help you resolve that, right? Is it the meeting organizer? Or is it the person you report to? Really getting more clear on why you're spending time in certain places. And if your role is to lead that meeting, kind of understanding what that expectation is from others and what you can do to create the experience that you want others to have. Okay. This is the third skill area. Sharing your point of view with senior leaders, even when you don't know the right answer. And this is another area that people get tripped up on regularly. The default for a lot of people is to be silent and to just kind of in their heads wish that they were able to offer something of value, but to actually just end up staying quiet. And so the idea here is to think about, all right, when I don't know the answer, is it still possible for me to speak up? And, not everyone has challenges with this, but this is surprisingly common. Not that it would happen in every single meeting, but often it happens when there's a hierarchy. And so authority figures are present, and it can be a little bit of um, it can just keep us quiet. For me personally, I remember a meeting or not a meeting. I was in an interview once, final interview for a job, and the chief learning officer who was interviewing me asked for my perspective on a challenge that they were having within the organization. And I remember being shocked that he would ask me and expect me to have something to say since I had never worked there before. And, I gave an answer. I don't think it was a great answer, but I thought about it a lot afterwards. And then as I ended up getting the job and worked in this organization, and realized that the chief learning officer was asking me because it helped him get to the right answer. And that without the perspectives of other people, he really wasn't able to get to a good solution. And this was a practice he used all the time. So let's dig into it a little bit. Here are some ideas about what to have in mind when you want to share your point of view, even when you don't know the right answer. So first, who knows the answer? If someone knows the answer, then of course, the next question is a meeting necessary? Maybe not. Maybe it's just you walking over to somebody's desk or you giving somebody a call and finding out what the answer is, right? Now, if no one does know the answer, this is where it gets more interesting, right? So let's say you're in a meeting and the answer is not clear. Why not contribute your perspective? And a lot of times this is because it's scary to say something that might be the wrong answer, right? But I have found in my work that actually demonstrating your point of view is often an unwritten value among leaders. So they are actually expecting people to contribute their points of view, even if they don't say so. And they're not necessarily expecting that to be the right answer, right? It's a part of contributing to the discussion that then gets you to the right answer. So there's this idea of giving them something to react to. So offering up a perspective, maybe it's a partial answer based on where you sit in the organization and your set of experiences. But laying something down for people to react to is what helps build the conversation into something that can then lead to a solution. And if your perspective is missing and you're a crucial member of the team, then you know that the solution will be less correct in a way, right? Um, so this idea of perspectives kind of adding up almost to, in my mind, I think of it as a math equation where you add perspectives, they change each other, and they help create a way forward, a way through complexity, and they help build the way. All right. So I want to spend a couple of minutes. We're going to have a Q&A in a little bit, but a couple of minutes just trying to bring some of this together to apply it to your life. And using a kind of more developmental framework, meaning we are all I'm guessing if you're in this webinar, you are interested in learning and growing, and you're open to changing some of the ways that you do things so that you can be more effective in your work. And it has a huge impact on how you see yourself and your life. So developmental, kind of in my mind, I think of it as something that takes longer than people like to admit. It can take 3 to 6 months. It can take longer. So the idea being, it feels like you have to resolve all of this and learn it immediately, like maybe in time for your next meeting. But let's just put that into perspective a little bit. So imagine that you have time to develop your competencies, right? Maybe in your last performance review, you got some feedback about being more assertive. The expectation shouldn't be that you immediately are able to just make that quick change, right? That's not how it works, and we ought to give ourselves time. So giving yourself that time, maybe give yourself, like I said, 3 to 6 months. Maybe it's longer. Maybe it needs to be quicker, but kind of put that into perspective. Development requires change. That's what it is. It is about change and it's about growth. And change requires starting somewhere. And we're talking about intentional change in this case, right? Intentional change requires starting somewhere. Now, where? That's often the question. People really struggle with, well, where do I start? And it just simply requires a choice, which can be difficult. It can be difficult to choose where to start. So that's why we prioritize. We just do our best with prioritizing. Um, so that's what we'll do right now is we're just going to get started with a simple prioritization exercise. Um, and I'm going back to the 3 areas that we worked on today. And at the beginning, I asked you to assess your comfort level with each of these. So I first want to ask you if there's any updates you want to make to those. And after you update your comfort level, I want you to put these in order, okay? So number them 1 to 3 in order of which needs the most work at this moment of in your life. And secondly, what order would you put them in if you had to choose which one felt easiest for you to start working on now? There might be a difference. One might feel more important, and it might be a different one that actually feels easier to start on. I'd like you to pick the one that feels easiest to start with. The idea there is to create some momentum around making a change and some easy wins at the beginning to build some confidence. So now that you've picked the one that feels the easiest, I want you to apply it. And by what I mean by apply it to your context is that I want you to think about that meeting that's been giving you a little bit of friction. And I want you to apply the one that you chose to that as a goal, right? So in this next meeting that's giving me a little bit of friction, I am going to work on being more assertive or balancing decision-making and collaboration, whichever one you chose. And I want you to just take the next minute and a half to just free write some ideas. I've given you two options here, free writing and a little bit more structure. So just take the next minute and a half. What we're looking for is the next step. That's all. What would you do to take action? take a few more seconds to finish up. And that next step, make note of that. Um, what can be helpful there is to, if, and not everybody would need to go about this in the same way, but for many people, it helps to then bookend a little bit of time to work on that next step, to create some shape around it, right? So maybe after this presentation's over, finding um, even 15 minutes to give that a little bit more thought and think about what it looks like to take that step will be helpful. Just starting to build that more into the way that you do things. All right, so wrapping up before our Q&A, today we worked through 3 skill areas: being more assertive when leading meetings, balancing decision-making and collaboration, and sharing your point of view even when you don't know the right answer. And we did it in a few different ways, but we used storytelling. So hearing somebody else's story helps make it more relatable, helps us see why, what's the best way to put this? Why we're still struggling with something that some of us feel like we should have learned a long time ago, and yet we struggle with it, right? It's helpful to know that this is a part of people's career journeys, even when they're identified as high performers. And then using the communication triangle as a tool to help you identify what to work on. And really what I mean by that is where to place your attention. And that the idea, the tool of simply asking questions, asking open-ended questions, helps resolve your discomfort and helps you make a change. And then finally, we did a short application, right? We apply this information to your life. And by that, I mean, we applied this to a meeting that you have coming up. And that helps to take action, create momentum, and help you plan for a longer term change, if that's something you choose to do. All right. So that is it for the presentation. And I would love to take some questions if there are any in the chat, Shanta.
And we do have quite a lot of questions coming through, so I love the engagement. If we don't get to your question, we will definitely make sure to send that along to Lindsay. If you just email ccapsinfo@umn.edu, we'll make sure to get those over to Lindsay. And so now I will go into our questions here. So our first question is, do you have advice on reducing the anxiety post meetings? Like, I think of things, for example, did I say the right thing? How did I come across? Did I handle this properly? And what do I do better next time?
Okay, I love that question. I'm going to stop sharing the slides during the Q&A here. And okay, thank you for that question. That's a great question. I want to start by answering it kind of from a personality point of view, meaning some of us, and I would include myself in this group. Well, think of this as like your inner critic kind of coming into the picture, right? And you've come out of the meeting and you've got all these questions and you can tell there's a theme to them, right? Did I do a good enough job, right? And that's your inner critic. And some of us have a stronger inner critic, especially when we're feeling like there's like a performance in a way. And so advice I would have is number one, just to um, kind of again put this in perspective, know that everyone um, everyone is going to have that inner critic. You are not the only one that has those questions. And often the inner critic questions are they are a sign of you being a what I would call a coachable person, like someone who is open to learning, open to feedback. And that is a really, really positive attribute in an employee, in a person, in a friend, in a partner. It's a really strong attribute. Now, it's not always helpful, right? Like you're realizing, okay, this isn't I don't want to feel that way. I don't want to always be questioning myself, right? And so I think the knowing that this is common, that this is just a part of being human, and knowing that it's actually part of an attribute. I think the second thing I would say is that that's actually something you can work on by focusing on that very specific part of your experience in meetings. In other words, um, like instead of kind of being like, oh, I have to overhaul something I said in the meeting, actually paying a little more attention to how can I dial down, how can I reassure myself after meetings? Um, I work with people in leadership coaching, so maybe I would meet with someone for a few times and we would really target that and look at the specifics. But without knowing much more about that, I would say to coach yourself, you could pick up a book about, self-coaching and use that as like a mini project. Like, okay, in 6 months' time, I would like to um, be coming out of meetings saying, hey, I did a really good job in that meeting, right? Like changing that inner dialogue. So sorry, it's not a more, maybe it's not the answer you were looking for. And yet I think there's a lot that can be changed there. Yeah.
Thank you, Lindsay. So the next question here is accumulation of a few other questions, so it seems like it's pretty common for folks. But how do you recommend clarifying the purpose of the meeting with senior leaders? We currently have monthly sync meetings for updates and decision meetings that continue to get sidetracked with deeper discussions about unrelated issues.
Okay. Okay. So I want to say back what I think I heard in Shanta. Can you just so yeah, how do you go about clarifying the purpose of the meeting? And this specific question was around we have monthly meetings that are maybe meant for a certain purpose, but then the purpose gets sidetracked, or we end up talking about something else.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so I think there's two things there. There's one, how do you clarify the purpose? Um, and number two, how do you stay accountable to that purpose, maybe? Um, and so the clarifying of the purpose, I, I will say what has worked for me, and I think it's I had to discover this on my own, and it wasn't something I really heard from others, but it was really more just the questioning approach where you say like simply like what is the purpose of this meeting? You ask people who you think know the purpose of the meeting. And in the process of doing that, you might find that they don't know either, right? Which is not so reassuring, but it gives you information. And it gives you, I think, an opportunity to weigh in on what you think the purpose is. Um, so I just want to offer that up as like and and asking it in an open mind and curious way, right? How you go about clarifying that purpose. Here's what I think it is. Is that what it is? Doing that in conversation, and it doesn't have to be done formally. It can be done informally. Stopping by someone's office, asking them, "Hey, I need a little more clarity on this meeting. that I'm showing up for so I can prepare my thoughts. Um, so those are just a few thoughts about clarifying. I really lean into my interpersonal skills when doing stuff like this. I do not try to do that in a vacuum and just like dig into files and stuff. It's really more about the kind of the human side of work. Um, okay, so that's clarifying. And then staying accountable to the purpose. I think in the act of clarifying what the purpose is, you start to see how important is that meeting for people, and um, is the meeting more of a container for people just to get together and meet regularly so that they can bring their work issues in? Then you might have a broader purpose for the meeting that's not super specific and allows there to be flexibility, especially if you're finding that what's discussed is not what you think is going to be discussed. And then the other thing I would say is, um, as an individual, you can say, "Hey, I came to this meeting thinking that we were talking about this, and here's why." Is is this something that we still want to talk about? And is it more important or less important than the thing we're talking about right now? I know, and that's being more assertive in meetings.
Thank you for that. I like the multi-layered kind of alternative kind of resources you can use. So not just as an individual, but what you can do for others as well. That actually answered the next question about if it is ambiguous and why am I in the meeting. So I will go to the next question here is, do you have advice for sharing perspectives in meetings where you know one or more leader is known for being judgmental or not open to ideas?
Yes. So, do I have advice for being in meetings where someone's known for being judgmental?
Mhm.
And what was the last part of it?
So not open to new ideas and leadership.
Yeah. Um, I fall back on my interest in personality differences there, and I think I'm not alone. I think many of us are find it fascinating that we can all be so different, right? Somebody can be in the meeting and be not open to new ideas, and someone else could be sitting across the table and be only interested in new ideas and not so interested in moving the ball down the field or something, right? You've got it's so fascinating to me how like the range that we have. And if I'm understanding the question correctly, it doesn't feel that good to be offering up ideas in a meeting where there's someone sitting across the table from you who's judgmental and not open to them, right? So that it takes um, it takes effort to figure out, what am I going to do with that? Why wouldn't I just stay silent? Or of course I'm going to be offended that they are judging my ideas here. Um, so I think again, it's kind of a multi-layered answer that takes maybe it's like a little bit about taking some different steps over the course of time. The first thing that I would do is I would pick up a book about, I know this may not jive with a lot of people, but I would pick up a book about personality, because then that would allow me to just sit with it and to soak it in and, I don't know, almost accept the differences in the room. Um, so that's one thing. And the second thing would be probably something you've heard before, but kind of activating your curiosity. Um, why, why is it that this person is not open to new ideas? What have I ever seen them be open to a new idea before? What was different about that situation? Or I wonder if I could present this idea and not make it seem so new and different, because in fact, it's actually not totally out here. It's actually kind of similar to the stuff that we've been talking about. So kind of that curiosity, but also the looking for the way that you would connect with them. And then finally, they're not the only person in the room, probably in this case. And so trying not to give too much weight to the judgmental person. They're one of others. And in a way, they don't deserve so much attention. Others who might be more willing to move things forward might be where you want to place your attention. And it sometimes means you're kind of putting your blinders on to that energy.
Great, thank you. So I think we have enough time for maybe one more question, and then we'll wrap up here. Again, for those who I didn't get your questions to, Courtney did add our email for CCAP's info there in the chat. So, for example, if you do want additional resources, we can definitely pass it along to Lindsay, and she'll be able to give some suggestions for those. But our next question here is, um, which one was that? Oh, do you? Well, there we go. What suggestions do you have for moving leadership towards making a decision?
Okay. To make a decision, I'll keep this brief, but moving leadership. Okay. So in that case, okay, there's not one way to do this, but I'll give you one way for now. And that would be putting in a fair amount of energy prior to the meeting in preparation. So gathering your thoughts and really strategizing around, okay, we've got 1 hour for this meeting. Where do I think we're at right now? And what is my plan for driving us towards that outcome? And really taking that, like taking the lead there and doing the legwork before the meeting. If there are people you need to talk to, if there's independent work that you need to do to make a plan, if you need to share, this is the goal for the meeting, be very explicit, and then cut out anything superfluous so that you're able to focus and not get sidetracked. Um, yeah, that's what I would say.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much again for sharing your insightful information on this topic. And if you could just reshare the last couple of slides, and I'll try to go quickly through wrapping up the webinar.
All right.
So, CCAPS now offers flexible workforce development solutions designed to equip employees with targeted knowledge and skills your organization needs. Our program includes industry-driven bachelor's and master's program, along with 14 non-credit certificates and over 90 individual courses and growing. If you or someone in your organization would like to learn more, please schedule a consultation with our business development manager, Beth Laurie. And there is a QR code there if you want to check out that out a little bit further. And if you go to the next slide. As I mentioned earlier, we will send a link to the webinar recording within a week of today's webinar. The recording will be posted to our CCAPS webinar archive page, as well as our CCAPS YouTube page. And the University of Minnesota employees are eligible to receive well-being points for listening to our webinar. So please use that link there for the form. And our college's contact information will be listed on the last slide if you'd like to learn more. I want to thank you all again for listening and your engagement here. And thank you, Lindsay, for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody.